Ask most Americans what they picture when they hear the word trucker, and you'll probably get some version of the same image. A lone figure behind the wheel of the big rig, cutting across the country on their own schedule, answering to nobody. It's a romantic idea, baked into decades of movies, country songs, and CB radio culture. The problem is that this image is almost completely detached from what trucking actually looks like today for the vast majority of people who do it. Somewhere between the open road myth and the modern reality, something broke. To understand what happened, it helps to look at how the job used to work, how it got reshaped by a single piece of legislation, and how that reshaping created two very different trucking industries that now exist side by side, one that's genuinely a decent way to make a living, and one that quietly grinds people down. Trucking as a mass industry is barely a century old. In the years before and during the First World War, moving freight by truck was a slow, unreliable business. Roads outside major cities were often unpaved. Trucks topped at around 40 miles per hour, and breakdowns were routine. But wartime demand for moving military supplies forced rapid improvement. Trucks got standardized coupling systems. Diesel engines became more efficient, and tires improved enough to stop shredding under heavy loads. By 1920, there were roughly 1 million trucks operating on American roads, and the industry kept expanding for the following decade. Growth on that scale eventually attracted regulators, and competitors who wanted the growth slowed down. The railroads, which had dominated long-distance freight for generations, were losing business to this newer, more flexible form of transportation, and they pushed hard for the government to rein it in. That effort succeeded in 1935 with the Motor Carrier Act, an amendment to the existing Interstate Commerce Act. The law required trucking companies to obtain certificates to operate, and it set standardized rates for hauling freight. Existing carriers were simply grandfathered into the system, while new entrants had to prove there was an unmet need in the market before they'd even be considered for a license. In practice, this froze the competitive landscape in place. Companies that were already established, including early parcel carriers, held on to their regional advantages for decades, while newcomers found it nearly impossible to break in. The regulatory system didn't just control who could drive trucks for a living. It controlled what they could carry and where. Rate-setting boards dictated pricing on specific routes, and carriers were often restricted to hauling only certain categories of goods. A farmer permitted to move produce across state lines might be legally barred from hauling anything else on a return trip, even if there was cargo sitting right there waiting to go the other direction. The system was designed to protect both established companies and the drivers who worked for them, and for a while, it mostly did, but the cost of that protection was passed straight to consumers. Freight rates under the regulated system are estimated to have run 30 to 50% higher than they would have under open competition. And by the late 1970s, frustration with that inefficiency had built into serious political momentum. That momentum culminated in the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, which tore down almost the entire regulatory structure built in 1935. Trucking companies could suddenly operate wherever they wanted, haul whatever cargo they wanted, and set their own prices. Entry into the market opened up dramatically. Anyone with a commercial license and a truck could, in theory, become a carrier. The effect on the labor market was immediate and enormous. Between 1977 and 1996, the number of truck drivers in the United States nearly doubled, climbing from around 1.1 million to close to 1.9 million. The number of individual trucking companies exploded even further, growing from about 20,000 in 1980 to well over 500,000 by the mid-2020s. On paper, deregulation looks like an unambiguous win. More competition, more choice, cheaper shipping. And for consumers and the companies that rely on freight, it largely was. But that flood of new entrants also meant a flood of new labor competing for the same work. And that competition pushed wages down and stripped away the collective bargaining power that unions had built over the previous decades. This is a paradox sitting at the center of American trucking today. The country depends on trucking more than it ever has, moving nearly all of the consumer goods by road at some point in the supply chain. And yet driving a truck for a living has, for a huge share of the workforce, become a genuinely difficult way to make ends meet. Not every trucking job fits that description, though, and the split between the good jobs and the bad ones tends to come down to one structural question. Is the driver an employee, or are they an independent contractor? Large retail and logistics companies that run private fleets, moving their own goods between distribution centers and stores, often hire drivers directly as employees. These jobs tend to come with real benefits. Predictable regional routes that get drivers home within a matter of days, compensation structure around more than just miles driven, and starting pay that, according to postings in driver accounts across trucking forums and social media, can reach into six figures. Pay in these roles is typically layered. A per mile rate for driving, additional flat fees for each stop or load handled, and extra compensation when a delivery gets delayed through no fault of the driver, whether that a backed up loading dock or a broken trailer discovered during a pre-trip inspection. Because a company owns the trucks and employs the drivers directly, it has an incentive to keep them around, trained, and reasonably satisfied. The trade-off for drivers in these roles is a loss of independence. Modern company trucks are usually outfitted with tracking systems and dash cams, ostensibly to help dispatch coordinate arrivals and protect drivers in the event of an accident. Many drivers experience it differently, as constant monitoring of their speed, their routes, and even how thoroughly they conduct their pre-trip vehicle inspections. It's a job that offers real stability in an industry that mostly doesn't, but it comes at the cost of the autonomy that drew a lot of people to trucking in the first place. And getting one of these positions isn't easy. Companies that offer this kind of steady, well-compensated work can afford to be selective, typically requiring years of clean driving history, a spotless record, physical exams, and extensive additional training before a driver is ever handed the keys. The other half of the industry looks almost nothing like this. Of the roughly 3.5 million truckers working in the United States, close to half classify as owner-operators rather than company employees. In theory, this is the purest version of the trucking myth. Drivers who own their own rigs, set their own schedules, and choose their own loads. In practice, only a minority of owner-operators actually operate under their own independent authority. A much larger share lease their time and equipment to a larger logistics company, technically remaining independent contractors while functioning, in almost every practical sense, as employees without any of the protections that come with that status. This arrangement suits logistics companies well. They avoid paying for benefits, insurance, vehicle maintenance, or even fuel, while still dictating routes, schedules, and equipment standards tightly enough that courts and labor advocates have increasingly questioned whether independent contractor is an accurate label at all. Several major logistics firms have faced lawsuits and settlements over exactly this kind of misclassification, and the pattern has drawn attention from federal regulators as well. The consequences of this model show up most starkly at the country's busiest ports. Drivers hauling shipping containers from ports like Long Beach to nearby warehouses often work as independent contractors paid only for completed loads, not for time spent waiting. And the waiting can be brutal. Port congestion routinely add an hour or more to a single trip. Drivers can get stuck in a wrong queue and lose hours to a simple routing mistake. And during the worst of the pandemic-era supply chain crunch, some drivers reported waiting up to 6 hours just to pick up a container, sometimes only be turned away because they'd run out of legally mandated driving hours for the day. None of that waiting time is compensated. A pre-pandemic study out of UC Berkeley estimated the median annual income for an independent port driver, after accounting for their own expenses, at around $28,000, a brutal number for work that routinely runs well past a standard 40-hour week. A similar dynamic plays out far from any coastline. In places like the Permian Basin in West Texas, where the oil and fracking industry depends on a constant stream of trucks hauling sand from mines to drilling sites. Job postings in the region often advertise eye-popping potential earnings, sometimes framed as $9,000 a week or more under most favorable possible conditions. Those numbers describe an unusually productive driver on an unusually good week, and companies posting them have little obligation to be more precise, since the drivers they're recruiting are technically independent contractors rather than employees owed an accurate wage estimate. The reality on the ground is very different. Sand mines and well sites frequently lack basic infrastructure like restrooms, and drivers routinely wait anywhere from 2 to 24 uncompensated hours just to load or unload. In the summer of 2024, frustration boiled over into organized protests, with drivers blocking mine entrances and handing out flyers describing the actual working conditions behind the job listings. from the perspective of the oil companies and the logistics firms that supply them, though, a line of trucks waiting outside a site simply looks like demand being met. If a frustrated driver quits, another one with a commercial license and an aging secondhand truck is usually ready to take their place. This is really the through line connecting the port truckers and the Permian Basin haulers to the broader turnover crisis in the industry. At large long-haul carriers, turnover rates have been measured as high as 90% in a single year. 9 out of 10 drivers hired by some of these companies won't still be there 12 months later. That's not simply the result of a few bad actor companies misclassifying workers, though that's certainly part of it. It's closer to a structural feature of an industry where labor supply has been kept artificially high since 1980, giving companies little incentive to improve conditions when the market will always produce another driver willing to try. Looking forward, there's a widely discussed narrowing of the industry already underway. Autonomous trucking pilots are moving from experimental to commercial in places like West Texas and along fixed routes between major logistics hubs, with driverless sand-hauling operations already running on private roads and driverless long-haul routes launching on public highways. The economic case for automation is straightforward: lower costs, greater efficiency, and potentially fewer accidents. And it's very likely that trucking will move steadily in that direction over the coming years. What's genuinely uncertain is what that transition means for the human side of the industry described here. Will automation primarily eat into the difficult, poorly compensated independent contractor work that's already pushing people out of profession, potentially easing the labor shortage companies complain about? Or will it hollow out the stable, well-paid fleet jobs first, since those routes are often the most predictable and therefore the easiest to automate? Nobody currently running a logistics company, driving a truck, or writing legislation about the industry can answer that with real confidence yet. What's clear is that American trucking, having been shaped once already by a single act of Congress in 1980, is heading into its next major transformation, and the drivers living through it have far less say in how it unfolds than the truckers of any previous era.